Hello, everyone. In 6.5, we are going to be adding um, kind of an extra layer to the idea of margin of error. So we'll start here by reviewing margin of error. Then we're going to add kind of an extra layer of that, which will give us another indicator of how reliable or how maybe unreliable the margin of error can be. So we're going to go back to this and use this example. The Gallup poll found 57% of Americans had bought a lottery ticket in the last 12 months. And the question is, what is the margin of error? So just to review that, the margin of error is 1 over this plus or minus the square root of the sample size. Okay. And so if I pull out the calculator here and do that, okay, the margin of error of this particular scenario, I'm just going to round it to the nearest tenth, is about 2.6%. Okay. But here's the thing with margin of error. Here's the flaw with margin of error, and we have identified this back in, it was like chapter 3 when we first learned it. Is 1,523 people is supposed to represent the American population. Okay. And so, although 1,523 people is a lot of people and it provided a good margin of error, it's not a lot of people compared to the population of the United States, right? And so, one extra data point that we have with margin of error is called a confidence statement. Okay. Now, there are ways to calculate confidence statements. In fact, if some of your friends that might be in AP statistics calculate confidence statements for different types of samples. But for us, we're just going to be using the same level of confidence each time. But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here. So a confidence statement is used to state how much we can trust the result of one sample. So quite literally, a confidence statement is how confident we are that the sample that we took is accurate. When I say accurate, I mean that it accurately portrays the population. Okay. So your confidence statement has two parts. Again, the margin of error, which is 1 plus or 1 over plus or minus the square root of n, where n is the sample size. But then we can also state the level of confidence. And the level of confidence represents what percent of all possible samples satisfy the margin of error. Okay. And so I probably should have done this the first time, but just as a reminder, what we can do with the margin of error is this gives us a range. So the statistic that we found was that 57% of Americans have bought a lottery ticket in the last 12 months. What the margin of error tells us is that um, that statistic for the whole population is estimated that it would fall somewhere between 4.4 and 59.6%. So the population likely wouldn't be right at 57%. But what the margin of error tells us is that it would fall somewhere within this range. Remember, this plus or minus 2.6% gets added and subtracted to the 57%. Okay. And so what that then tells us is this level of confidence will tell us what percent of all samples satisfy the margin of error. What percent of all samples of the population would fall in this range? And so, again, there are ways to calculate this based on the margin of error in the different samples. But for the most part, we assume that a sample has a confidence level of 95%. Okay, so again, what that means is that if we were to continue taking samples of the population, that 95% of those samples would fall within that range. Okay, and so that's what a confidence interval, and then again, that confidence that confidence statement then tells us that there is a little flaw in the margin of error. Okay, the confidence level will actually decrease the bigger the sample. Okay, think about it as throwing a ball through a window. The wider the window, the more likely you are going to get the ball through the window. The smaller the window, the less likely it's going to happen. Okay? And so again, this is probably the opposite of what you would think. So what that's saying is that if we take more and more samples, that confidence level is actually going to drop because the margin of error is getting smaller, which again, to think of it as the window is getting smaller. Okay? So the smaller the margin of error, the smaller the confidence percentage is, because again, that window range is getting smaller. Okay? But for us, we're just always going to work with this 95% number. And so what you really just need to make sure you understand is that that 95% number is that represents the number of samples that will fall within that range. And it looks like when I had made these notes, I rounded to the nearest whole number, but we had said I did 10th here. So it's to say that 95% of all samples will fall within that 2.6% margin of error range. So your confidence statement applies to the population, not the sample. Okay. As we know, a conclusion about the population can never be completely certain. As I said, samples can use a confidence level that is higher than 95%. Looks like I had kind of gotten ahead of myself because a lot of what I just said is being restated here. The larger the margin of error, the higher the confidence level. And again, think of it as a window, throwing a ball through a window. If you have a large margin of error, that means that you have a really big window to get that ball through. And so we are more confident that that ball is going to go through the window. If we have a smaller margin of error, okay, now our window is smaller, so we're not going to be as confident that we're going to get the ball through the window. Okay, so that's why it might seem a little confusing. It might seem a little backwards, is maybe what I should say. But that's kind of the logic behind it. Is again, try to think of it as trying to throw a ball through a window, and the smaller the window, the less confidence you're going to be. So again, the method that we use, there are different methods to calculate this, but the method that we use will give us a 95% confidence level unless it is otherwise stated. Again, I'm not going to make you calculate it for our class, but if it's stated in the direction that the confidence level is different, then of course just use that confidence level. Okay. And so that's 6.5. Again, 6.5 is just looking at going a little bit, expanding on the idea of margin of error. We know that that's not always going to give us an accurate result. And so with the margin of error, we also use confidence statements to also, it's kind of another data point on how well the margin of error does or does not represent the whole population. Okay. So again, that's 6.5. Go ahead and work on the homework and have a good day.